Character: Caligula, Roman emperor, a subtle, chilling smirk playing on his lips, dressed in imperial robes. Wife: Roman noblewoman, her face pale with terror, dressed in noble attire. Senator: Roman senator, his face frozen in horror, dressed in senatorial attire. Other senators: Roman senators, their faces pale with dread, dressed in senatorial attire. Action: Caligula leads the senator's wife away with an unnerving grace. The senator watches, paralyzed by terror, unable to move or speak, while his colleagues grip their trembling wine cups, eyes wide with profound fear, a silent testament to their complicity. Camera: low angle, focused on the senator's paralyzed face and Caligula's retreating form. Environment: lavish Roman dining hall, flickering oil lamps casting long shadows, an atmosphere of suffocating dread. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, Roman emperor, a cruel, satisfied smile on his lips, dressed in imperial robes. Wife: Roman noblewoman, eyes vacant and distant, her spirit seemingly shattered, dressed in noble attire. Senator: Roman senator, a mask of forced, grateful composure on his face, nodding performatively, dressed in senatorial attire. Colleagues: Roman senators, their gazes rigidly fixed on their plates, dressed in senatorial attire. Action: Caligula casually recounts disturbing details, his gaze piercing the senator. The senator's wife sits beside him, utterly hollow. The senator forces a grateful smile, nodding, while his esteemed colleagues avert their eyes, a silent confession of their shared terror and shame. Camera: close up on the table, focusing on the contrasting expressions. Environment: richly decorated Roman chamber, heavy shadows under the arches, oppressive silence, a single wine cup ominously foreground. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, Roman emperor, appearing younger, with an intensely focused, analytical expression, dressed in simple, severe Roman attire. Action: Caligula stands before a complex, abstract schematic of psychological torment, represented by intricate, interlocking mechanisms and subtle, dark energies. He gestures with precise control, as if fine-tuning a machine designed for the systematic destruction of the human spirit. Camera: mid-shot, slightly above, emphasizing Caligula's command over the intricate, sinister design. Environment: a dimly lit, minimalist Roman study, geometric lines of light defining oppressive space, hinting at the cold, calculating nature of tyranny. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: young Caligula, a spirited boy, clad in a perfectly miniature legionnaire's uniform, complete with tiny, polished armor and distinctive little red boots. Action: being joyously hoisted into the air by battle-hardened Roman soldiers who are roaring with laughter, playfully tossing him amongst themselves. Camera: wide shot, capturing the scene of camaraderie and youthful delight. Environment: a bustling, sun-drenched Roman military camp, vibrant with activity, distant tents and standards under a clear sky. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula's eldest brother, a gaunt, emaciated figure, clad in tattered, simple garments. Action: frantically attempting to consume the very stuffing from his mattress, his eyes wide with desperate hunger. Camera: a haunting medium close-up, emphasizing the raw desperation and the texture of the damaged mattress. Environment: a dark, stark prison cell, the stone walls oppressive, a single, weak beam of light filtering in, heavy with an atmosphere of profound suffering. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: a 19-year-old Caligula, the solitary survivor, his expression a mask of apprehension and deep-seated trauma, dressed in a muted Roman tunic and simple cloak. Emperor Tiberius, a figure of profound paranoia and depravity, is enthroned, surrounded by sycophantic astrologers and yes-men, their faces obsequious. Action. Caligula stands on the threshold of an opulent yet ominous chamber, summoned to the island fortress, his posture conveying reluctant obedience. Camera. A low-angle shot, making Tiberius appear towering and menacing, with Caligula slightly smaller in the foreground, creating a sense of impending doom. Environment. The lavish but unsettling interior of Tiberius's fortress on Capri, opulent draperies, heavy shadows, ornate yet claustrophobic, radiating an aura of hidden horrors and depravity. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character. Caligula, teenage, slender, intense gaze, imperial youth's tunic. Tiberius, aged, stern, imposing, imperial robes, a dark aura, watching Caligula with calculating eyes. Action. Caligula subtly observes Tiberius from a slightly recessed position, a mask of calm obedience on his face, but his eyes reflect deep, hidden study and suppressed terror. Tiberius is seated, appearing bored or contemplative, but his gaze occasionally flickers towards Caligula, conveying a master-apprentice dynamic of cruelty and survival. Camera. Close-up on Caligula's face, then shifting to Tiberius, then a wider shot showing the subtle interaction between them. Focus on the psychological tension. Environment. A dimly lit, opulent Roman palace interior, rich tapestries, marble columns, long shadows. The air is heavy with unspoken threats and psychological weight. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character. Caligula, emperor, recovering from illness, pale, gaunt, lying in an opulent bed, imperial purple robes draped over him. His eyes are wide, unsettling, conveying a profound, internal change, as if something vital has shattered within him. Action. Caligula is rising from a bed, his movements stiff and deliberate. The focus is on his face, which shows a terrifying shift in personality, a vacant benevolence replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. The air around him seems to ripple with unseen malevolence. Camera. Medium close-up on Caligula's face and upper body, emphasizing his changed expression and the luxurious yet confining sickroom. Environment. A lavish, dimly lit imperial bedchamber, rich fabrics, flickering oil lamps casting eerie shadows. A sense of unease and a psychological shift pervades the room. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character. Caligula, emperor, imperial robes, a look of chilling, manipulative grief. A spectral, ethereal image of Drusilla, radiant, serene, idealized Roman noblewoman's attire, with a subtle, haunting glow, is implied behind him. Action. Caligula stands before a map or blueprint representing his blueprint of terror, his hand gesturing towards the spectral Drusilla, as if explaining or unveiling his plan to an unseen audience. He is actively fostering the whispers, using Drusilla's image for a darker purpose. Camera. Medium shot, capturing Caligula and the ethereal Drusilla. The focus should be on Caligula's calculated expression and the unsettling juxtaposition of his power with the idealized, ghost-like sister. Environment. A grand, imposing Roman imperial chamber, perhaps with a large table displaying parchment blueprints or maps. Soft, yet dramatic lighting, highlighting Caligula and the ethereal figure. A pervasive atmosphere of psychological manipulation and impending dread. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character. A Roman senator, his face pale with dread, seated at a dining table. His wife, eyes wide with terror, her hands trembling. An innocent child, bright-eyed, looking up expectantly. Action. The child smiles, having just told a joke, while the parents are frozen in an agonizing struggle to suppress any reaction. Their face is a mask of forced composure. Camera. A level, medium close-up, focusing on the family's expressions of internal conflict and fear. Environment. A lavish Roman dining room. However, it is unnaturally silent, dimly lit, the opulent surroundings contrasted by an atmosphere thick with dread and unspoken terror. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: a Roman herald, draped in imperial colors, standing on a makeshift podium, unfurling a scroll. A small crowd of Roman noblemen and women, their faces a mixture of shock, horror, and disbelief. Action: the herald calls out, announcing the appalling prices for the sons and daughters of noble families, as the onlookers recoil in silent revulsion. Camera: wide shot, capturing the herald prominently and the horrified expressions of the diverse crowd. Environment: a grand Roman public square, bustling but momentarily stunned into silence, under a somber, overcast sky, with the imposing facade of the imperial palace looming in the background. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: an ornate, ancient Roman ledger, bound in aged leather, open to a page filled with meticulously written Latin script. A quill pen lies beside it. Action: the ledger's pages, covered with rows of names, dates, and transactions, are visible, symbolizing the cold, bureaucratic record of profound human degradation. A single drop of dark red paint could be seen near the quill, representing the spilled honor. Camera: extreme close-up, focusing intently on the detailed script and the texture of the old parchment and binding. Environment: a dark, quiet imperial archive or study, illuminated by a single, weak beam of light filtering from a distant window, casting long shadows. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, imperious Roman emperor, imperial robes. Action: slowly walking between opulent banquet tables, his gaze clinical and evaluating, sweeping over the terrified women, stopping at a table and taking the hand of a seated woman. Senator's wife, terrified Roman noblewoman, elaborate Roman noblewoman's attire. Action: seated rigidly, wide-eyed with dread, wine cup trembling visibly. Senator, frozen Roman senator, senatorial toga. Action: seated beside her, utterly paralyzed by fear, staring fixedly into his wine. Camera: low-angle shot, slight Dutch tilt, focusing on Caligula's methodical gaze, then panning to the wife's terrified face. Environment: an opulent imperial banquet hall, richly decorated with marble and gold, overflowing with food and wine, but pervaded by an oppressive, terrifying silence. Dramatic shadows cast by flickering oil lamps. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, cruel Roman emperor, imperial robes. Action: seated at a banquet table, leaning forward slightly, recounting details with a malevolent smirk, making lewd jokes, gesturing dismissively. Senator, humiliated Roman senator, senatorial toga. Action: seated opposite Caligula, forcing a grotesque smile, a single tear beginning to form in his eye, trying to laugh unnaturally, his hands clenched under the table. Senator's wife, vacant Roman noblewoman, elaborate Roman noblewoman's attire. Action: seated beside the senator, her gaze fixed anywhere but on her husband or Caligula, her spirit seemingly shattered. Camera: medium shot, eye level, focusing on the trio at the table, capturing the forced smiles and the wife's vacant stare, with Caligula dominating the frame. Environment: an opulent imperial banquet hall, the table laden with untouched delicacies. The atmosphere is thick with psychological tension, the lighting is dim and oppressive, highlighting the faces. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: senator, a Roman senator, senatorial toga, appearing aged beyond his years, shoulders slumped. Action: standing alone in a grand, empty Roman hall, his face a mask of profound despair, a ghost of a forced smile still lingering, as if carved into his features. His hands are open, palms up, as if everything has been stripped from him. Camera: full shot, slightly above eye level, emphasizing his smallness in the vast space. Environment: a vast, echoing marble hall, once grand but now feeling desolate and hollow, symbolic of a lost legacy. Stark, cold light streams through a distant archway, casting long, lonely shadows around the solitary figure. The floor is smooth, reflective, mirroring his isolation. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, sadistic, manipulative, psychologically astute but depraved, arrogant. Adorned in rich imperial robes of deep crimson and gold, his expression a mask of malevolent brilliance. The grieving father, outwardly composed but inwardly tormented, stripped of the right to mourn. Dressed in somber, plain Roman civilian attire, his face pale and eyes distant. Action: Caligula intently observes the grieving father across an opulent, long marble dinner table. Caligula leans forward, a chillingly calm, analytical expression, his eyes fixed on the father's face as if dissecting every twitch. The grieving father sits rigidly, hands clasped tightly under the table, forcing an expressionless mask, a single bead of sweat tracking his temple. Camera: mid-shot, focusing on the intense, silent confrontation between the two, capturing their facial micro-expressions. Environment: an opulent, high-ceilinged imperial palace dining hall, dimly lit by flickering oil lamps casting long, dramatic shadows. A lavish, untouched meal is spread between them, reflecting the psychological tension. The atmosphere is thick with palpable dread and silent cruelty. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: the grieving father, suffering, enduring, outwardly composed but inwardly tormented. Dressed in plain Roman civilian attire, his shoulders slightly hunched. Action: the grieving father's face is a mask of enforced tranquility, eyes vacant and bloodshot, fixed on an unseen point beyond the viewer. A vein subtly throbs at his temple. His hands, visible just above the table, are clenched into white-knuckled fists, portraying an immense internal struggle to suppress profound grief. Camera: tight close-up on the grieving father's face and hands, emphasizing the internal turmoil masked by external composure. Environment: the corner of an oppressively grand imperial dining hall, the background subtly blurred to enhance the focus on his inner world. The table before him holds a goblet of wine and an untasted plate of food. The lighting is dim, somber, casting deep shadows around his eyes, highlighting his exhaustion and internal pain. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, sadistic, manipulative, psychologically astute but depraved, arrogant. Adorned in imperial robes, a gold laurel wreath upon his head. Action: Caligula is seated at the head of a grand, empty dining table, a slight, almost imperceptible, chilling smirk playing on his lips. His posture is relaxed yet authoritative, his eyes narrowed with a cold, dispassionate scrutiny, fixed on an unseen subject off camera, as if meticulously analyzing a depraved scientific experiment. One hand rests on a scroll, suggesting his method. Camera: medium shot, slightly from a low angle to convey his power and control. Focus is on Caligula's chillingly analytical expression. Environment: a vast, echoing dining hall within the imperial palace, luxurious but cold, with marble columns receding into shadow. Dramatic, high-contrast lighting from an unseen source illuminates Caligula's face, leaving the rest of the hall in an ominous, dark contrast. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look: anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character: Caligula, dressed in opulent imperial robes, a gold laurel wreath upon his head, a cruel, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. Action: he stands before a grand, intricate model of the Roman Empire, crafted from marble and gold, gesturing dismissively with one hand. Unseen by him, a hairline fissure, subtle as a shadow, propagates across the model's foundation. Camera: high angle, wide shot, capturing both Caligula's dominant posture and the full, detailed scope of the Empire model with the emerging flaw. Environment. An imperial study, bathed in the dramatic, low light of a setting sun filtering through a high window, casting long, foreboding shadows. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character, Cassius Chaerea, a hardened soldier in full Praetorian Guard uniform, his face etched with controlled fury, his eyes reflecting a deep, simmering rage. Caligula, adorned in rich imperial purple, stands slightly above him, a contemptuous sneer on his face, handing a small, symbolically effeminate scroll to Chaerea. Other Praetorian guards stand in the background, their expressions a mix of discomfort and suppressed amusement. Action. Chaerea's hand hovers over the hilt of his gladius, his knuckles white, as he is forced to receive the humiliating daily password. Camera. A level, medium close-up, focusing on Chaerea's stoic defiance and Caligula's mocking expression, with the background blurred slightly to emphasize the interaction. Environment. A stark, grand hall within the imperial palace, illuminated by the harsh, direct light of a high archway, emphasizing the severity of the scene. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character. Cassius Chaerea, a formidable figure in his Praetorian Guard uniform, stands alone, his broad shoulders slightly hunched, his lethal sword gleaming at his hip. His face is a mask of grim determination, eyes narrowed with a chilling, singular focus, as if looking through an unseen opponent. Action. He stands in a moment of terrible realization, the accumulation of corrosive poison evident in the set of his jaw, poised between enduring humiliation and the precipice of violent action. Camera. Low angle, tight close-up on Chaerea's face and his hand resting on his sword, emphasizing his power and the weight of his decision. Environment. A shadowy, narrow passage within the palace, illuminated by a single, stark beam of light that highlights the metallic gleam of his armor and weapon, creating a sense of imminent, inescapable confrontation. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character. Caligula, pale with shock and fear, imperial robes torn. Chaerea, grim, hardened soldier, sword uplifted. Conspirators, shadowy figures, surrounding Caligula, their faces obscured by the dim light. Action. Caligula stumbles, attempting to flee in a confined, dimly lit corridor, surrounded by a swarm of attacking conspirators. Camera. Low angle, tight focus on Caligula's face and the encroaching figures. Environment. Dimly lit, claustrophobic underground corridor, rough-hewn stone walls pressing in on both sides. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character. Caesonia, desperate, pleading, Roman noblewoman's attire with areas of damaged texture. Praetorian Guard, unyielding, heavily armed, uniform with subtle red paint stains, sword held firmly. Action. Caesonia desperately pleads with unyielding Praetorian guards in a dimly lit palace hall. Camera. Medium close-up, focusing on her distraught expression and the guards' stern, unforgiving faces. Environment. Opulent Roman palace interior, bathed in flickering torchlight and deep shadows, conveying urgency and fear. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character. Julia Drusilla, a small child, crying piteously, alone on the cold floor. Praetorian Guard, silhouetted, ominous, sword at his side, looking down at the child. Action. A small child is left crying alone on the cold marble floor, observed by a grim, silhouetted Praetorian Guard, conveying desolation and the chilling end of innocence. Camera. High angle, looking down at the child, the guard partially obscured but imposing. Environment. A grand, cold Roman palace room, empty except for the child and guard, with stark, chilling light emphasizing emptiness. Style. Watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters. Look, anti-distortion, AR 16 to 9. Character. Claudius, a middle-aged man with a noticeable stutter and a distinct limp, his face a mix of bewilderment and fear, wearing simple Roman civilian attire. Praetorian guards, hardened soldiers with determined expressions, in polished Praetorian guard uniforms, carrying swords. Action: Praetorian guards, strong and resolute, hoist a trembling Claudius onto their shoulders. His expression is one of surprise and confusion, a stark contrast to their focused, decisive demeanor as they carry him forward. Camera, low angle, focusing on the upward movement of Claudius and his bewildered face, framed against a bright sky. Environment: a bustling, dusty Roman military camp, with scattered tents and legionary standards in the background, bathed in strong midday light that casts sharp shadows. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character: an implied presence of Caligula, perhaps a faint, shadowy silhouette or a stylized imperial eagle, but the primary focus is on the machinery. Action: an intricate, dark, and menacing machine, composed of intertwined Roman architectural elements, unfurling legal scrolls, and pieces of legionary armor, with interlocking gears slowly turning. The machine emanates a subtle, pulsating glow, symbolizing its continuous and insidious operation. Camera, wide shot, capturing the complexity and ominous scale of the dark, ancient mechanism. Environment: an ominous, dimly lit subterranean chamber reminiscent of Roman catacombs, with cold, metallic glints reflecting from the machine's turning parts, surrounded by ancient, weathered stone. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character: a series of stylized, shadowed busts or profiles of Roman emperors, Caligula, Nero, Domitian, and Commodus. Each bust displays a subtle but distinct progression of increasingly severe or distorted facial features. Action: the busts are arranged in a chronological line, seemingly emerging from a faint, glowing blueprint pattern etched into the background, visually representing a continuous, malevolent design. Camera, eye-level shot, focusing on the succession of emperors and the underlying blueprint. Environment: a somber, grand ancient Roman hall or mausoleum, sparsely illuminated by a faint, eerie light filtering through high, narrow apertures, emphasizing the passage of time and the enduring, dark legacy. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character: Caligula, a young man with a subtle, observant expression, wearing an elegant Roman tunic, appears to be a loyal attendant. Tiberius, an aged emperor with a stern, calculating gaze, draped in imperial robes. Action: Caligula, with a hidden, keen intensity, watches Tiberius's shadow loom large over a small, symbolic, vulnerable figure, metaphorically absorbing the principles of control. Camera, low angle, focusing on the power dynamic, soft focus on Caligula's subtly intense eyes. Environment: dimly lit imperial study, heavy shadows, ancient scrolls and busts suggesting hidden knowledge, a tense, oppressive atmosphere. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character: ancient Roman scribes, cloaked in shadowed tunics. Action: the scribes methodically feed scrolls and tablets into a roaring fire, their faces partially obscured by the smoke, which forms abstract, shadowy shapes of implied suffering and horror in the background. Camera, medium shot, eye level, focused on the burning documents with hints of the figures in action. Environment: a dark, cavernous archive room, lit only by the orange glow of the destructive fire, smoke swirling upwards, creating a sense of irreversible loss and hidden secrets. Style: watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9. Character: a spectral, translucent outline of Caligula, with a chillingly knowing expression, wearing an imperial crown. Action: the ghostly Caligula reaches out, projecting a complex, illuminated blueprint onto a crumbling, ancient stone wall, depicting abstract mechanisms of psychological control. Camera, high angle, looking down slightly on the blueprint, with Caligula's figure slightly out of focus in the foreground, emphasizing the lingering influence. Environment, a forgotten, shadowy Roman ruin, mist swirling around ancient columns, illuminated by the cold, ethereal glow of the blueprint, creating a pervasive sense of foreboding. Style, watercolor illustration, mid-distance 35 to 50 millimeters look, anti-distortion, AR 16:9.